We're live now. Ladies and gentlemen, 360 fans, we are so happy one more time to have Abe and Connie with us for another episode, another session. And today's session, it's really nice. I'm personally looking forward to it. We're going to be speaking about creativity and innovation in crisis times. And it's one of the hardest things to maintain during these times. And we're going to be learning today about how to maintain it and how to keep innovating and creativity during these times. So Abe and Connie, you have the mic, and one more time, we're really happy to have you with us again.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. You can hear me okay? You can hear me okay? Well, thank you so much for the invitation. And I know Connie and I really enjoyed our time with you last week, and your loyal fans, your loyal followers. And today we hope to talk a little bit about maintaining creativity. You know, one thing's for sure, creativity is an essential for all time. And yet times of crisis make it more difficult for us to be creative. And so we're excited to talk about that and to have some fun with you here today.
Thank you. My pleasure. Connie.
Hello, everyone. We're just so delighted to be here with you. And today we want to chat with you about what it looks like to be creative in crisis. And so I want to walk you through the idea of how this happens. Creativity always comes from crisis. You know, when we're comfortable, we're our least creative because we're used to our patterns. We're used to our ways of thinking. We're coasting along, as you could say. But creativity has to happen when we hit walls, when we hit things, barriers, obstacles. That's when we have to get creative. And so I thought maybe I would share with you a little bit of some of the times in my own life when I hit a wall in business and had to think creatively. And I want to share some of those stories with you. And as we start, I maybe want you to think and reflect on the times when you have had barriers and walls that you've hit. Because even though we're in a global pandemic right now, we've all had times in our lives when things maybe have crumbled down. Everything has flatlined for us. Crisis isn't new. The pandemic is new, but we can learn from where we've come from and how we can come out of it based on where we've been. And so the very first time I hit a real wall in business was when I was living my dream. I had just graduated from college and I was doing a job that I loved. I'm not sure if you've ever had a job that you loved, but I loved my job. I was there for 7 years. It was my sweet spot. And then I got laid off. And maybe some of you have experienced unemployment through this pandemic. And I remember when I got laid off from this job, it devastated me. I actually went into a 2-year downward spiral. I was in depression because I based so much of my identity in my role, in my job. And when my job was taken away, I felt like my identity, who I was taken away. And it took 2 years to build back that I was not my role. I was not my job. And sometimes we're not creative when pandemics happen or crisis happens because we're so wrapped up in who we were in that role. And when the role is taken away, it just sends us through a loop. And so I want to remind us all this morning that we are not our roles. The business that you own is not who you are. The job that you have or had, that's not who you are. You and yourself are very creative. And I remember when I finally came out of the hole that I was in, really sulking over the fact that I had lost this employment that I loved for 7 years, out came this brand new business that I ended up really loving. More than I loved my job. I started a dance business, if you can believe that, in a city here in Canada that has a lot of youth that are at risk. I was working with street youth, working with kids who desperately needed help and using dance to help them overcome obstacles. And this became everything to me. This was the ultimate job, the ultimate business. And I poured my heart and soul into this business, this dance studio. And if you've started a business, you know it's like having a baby. It is your own. You treasure it, you guard it, you pour endless hours and blood, sweat, and tears into it. And I remember one day my husband said to me that we were going to be moving to a different city. And again, my heart was devastated because I had spent now 2 years building this business that I loved so much. And so I determined in my heart that I was not going to let this fall. I was going to keep this business alive. And so I hired a manager. And then from there, we moved and everything was going well until I got a phone call one day. And the manager said to me that the landlord had locked them out of the room, out of the business. They couldn't get in. They had all these students right there outside with them, and they couldn't get in to teach class. And I remember at that moment just feeling so desperate. And my manager quit right there, which meant that my business died that day. Just died out of the blue. It was out of nowhere. It died. And Abe mentioned this last week in our webinar. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. And in that moment, when that business that I had poured so much into, when it died, I felt like I died. I can't begin to tell you the grief that I went through for now a couple of more years. And maybe you're in that place right now. You're in that place where you feel like everything you have built is now either being threatened or it's going to suffer greatly, or maybe it has died. But like Abe said last week, whenever something falls to the ground, when a seed falls to the ground, it has to die and something new comes out of that. And so I did not realize that out of this crisis, out of now losing not only my job, not only the business that I had built, but what was going to happen now was I was going to be led to a new adventure that was going to be more than I ever expected. When I came out of the depression of losing this business, out came this relationship with a person that I had met that had the same heart and dream that I had. And we began to build a new company. And this company lasted, 12 years. It's still going, but I have a very small part to play in it now. 12 years. And what came in this business was more. It was more than I would have expected, and it had everything that I wished that my other business would have had. And so sometimes I just want to remind us that sometimes when things die or when things get cut, new things get to grow. But a couple of years ago, I started to have this gut feeling that I needed to get out of this business. This particular business was going into schools and teaching students mental health skills through dance. And this is what I had done now for so many years. This is all I knew. And I had this gut feeling that I needed to get out of this. And so I remember thinking it was ridiculous. And I kept trying to replace myself with other people, trying to hold on to this business. But my gut was telling me, you need to get out of this business right now. And so last September, I left this business. I left it and I didn't know what I was going to do. Now I was unemployed. Some people call it fun-employed. I didn't think it was fun. I was worried. I didn't know where my income was going to come from. But I'm glad that I listened to my gut, because right now, every school, at least in Canada, is closed. And so I wouldn't have had a job if I wouldn't have listened to my gut. And so sometimes your gut and your mind and your heart are the most creative places in your body. And you need to listen to it. Maybe right now your gut is telling you to do something that sounds ridiculous. It sounds like that would never work. Why would I do that? My business is actually going well right now. But your gut will always tell you. And I'm so glad I listened to it, because not only would I not have a business right now, I would be fun employed and depressed. But now, working with Abe with Wellness Innovate, that opened up to me because I listened to my gut. And I didn't realize that sometimes creativity doesn't just have to come from us, but it comes from reaching out to those people who we know. You don't have to do this alone right now. The entrepreneur who is trudging along right now all by themselves, and not being adaptable and not being able to pivot, those are the ones that are going to suffer the most right now. Those who don't welcome the village and others into their story, into their journey, they're going to have a really hard time. So I made a really brave phone call to Abe. I phoned him up and I said, hey, I just have this idea that I really feel I'm supposed to be investing in businesses right now with mental health and resilience. I'm not sure why I'm telling you this, but I'm just wondering if there's a way we could partner. Well, sure enough, Abe says, I would love to go on this adventure of Wellness Innovate with you. And I wouldn't have had that if I wouldn't have listened to my gut. See, creativity came from listening to that. It came from remembering that we are not our roles. When we try to hold so tight onto what was, do we want to preserve in that moment? Do we want to preserve what has been for so long? Or are we open to opening our hands to something brand new? There's always new things that come from when things get cut back. In our yard, we have a beautiful crabapple tree. It was planted by my grandpa in 1950. This crabapple tree is a family legend. And every year, my husband takes this beautiful tree and cuts it right back. And so it looks so homely right now. But by the end of the summer, this tree is going to be flourishing. It's going to have so many crab apples because my husband cuts it back. And in times in our life, the times that we're most creative is when we allow those times when we're being cut back. We don't cut ourselves back. It just happens to us. And when we are cut back, new things always grow. It's a law of nature, and it works for us too. I had an unfortunate event happen when I decided to lay down this job, this business that I had been running now for 12 years. I had been working, building up people to run this business. Even though in my gut, I knew I was supposed to cut all ties. I was supposed to stop. I was not supposed to keep this business going. I knew that in my gut, but I hired someone, and that someone ended up really hurting myself. There was a disruption in our relationship and ended up hurting our business. And sometimes when betrayals happen and when these unfortunate events happen to our businesses, we can either get bitter or we can get better. And in these moments, we can sink into despair, or we can decide, I am going to rise from this. Something good is going to come from this. And so we're not our most creative when we're anxious, when we allow ourselves to go to those dark places, and we will, because losing a business, having financial cutbacks, experiencing crisis, those are real things. And a lot of times we're taught to just suck it up and push it down. But if we do that, we ignore the heart. We ignore the heart that's inside of us that either will flourish or diminish in times of crisis. And so we need to listen to those emotions. You need to name those emotions in order to tame them. When we don't know how we feel, when we ignore grief, it just remains chaotic for us. But when we name it and when we sit with it for a moment, however long it takes, it actually can form foundation and stability inside of us. And what goes on inside of us is what flourishes our businesses and our homes. And oftentimes we want to cheat the system We want our businesses to be successful. We want our homes to look amazing. We want our children to show honor and respect and bring a good name to our family. But we have to realize that that starts right here inside of us. And when we ignore the inside of us, then those things can't flourish. And they may look like they're flourishing on the outside, but it'll only take just one little thing to break it, and then our whole world crumbles. But when your foundation inside of you is strong, that's when you can flourish. And when we're not flourishing on the inside, we are anxious. We are constantly looking around, wondering, who's going to betray me? What's going to happen next? We become very reactive instead of responsive. And when we're anxious, we're living in the back of our brain, and we're not able to be creative. This part of our brain right here, the prefrontal cortex, is where we reason. It's where we are creative. It's where we problem solve. But there's no way that this part of our brain gets activated when we're anxious, because that anxiety keeps us reactive, and it keeps us in a state where we can't think forward. Right now, you may find yourself feeling anxious, uncertain. That is a word that we hear a lot, is uncertain. You may be feeling you don't know what's going to happen. But when you can name that emotion, I am feeling uncertain, I am feeling fearful, I am feeling insecure of what's going to happen. If you actually name that emotion, then you actually tame it, and you can move from the back of your brain to your prefrontal cortex. I want to share with you some businesses. There are businesses in North America. We experienced the Great Depression. I don't know, did you guys experience anything like that back in the 30s, the Sam?
Back in the 30s, or you mean now? Because back in the 30s, I wasn't there, so I wouldn't know.
You know, I wasn't there either. I mean, the skincare I use is not that good. In your history of Egypt, did your country ever go through anything like this before, economic downturn?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, when I speak about 360, for example, we've opened back in 2010. So we've been there now for 10 years. We've faced 2 revolutions in Egypt and Corona times. And then in every troubled time or hard times, there are many businesses that shut down, but there are many others that flourish. And I could name many companies, like for example, that opened actually during those 10 years, and they now became one of the top 5 companies in Egypt in their field, such as Jumia, for example. They opened during this time. That's a company that is similar to Amazon, for example. I know Instabug, and that's a company that, for example, check for bugs in softwares, and they opened during those times as well. I know Uber, for example, flourished during this time in Egypt and the region. So there are many companies that they still managed to grow during those times. And when many people think that's the end, and for their businesses or for their careers, at least, many others started thinking then that's the way out for a new beginning, like what you've mentioned, what happened with you as well. Today, I had a meeting with my team. It was the first face-to-face meeting after a month and a half now. So we've gathered in the office, and we intentionally tried to discuss and mention the positive things that happened to us during the past month and a half. And we've admitted that without this time, we wouldn't have re-innovated who we are as a company, and we wouldn't have had the chance to launch 360 Cloud Solutions, which is a new company that we have launched during this time, when many other companies let go of their team members, we were able to recruit more people and open a new company. And right now we're getting requests, and we signed an agreement through that company, which is in a way keep us running. So I haven't experienced it in the 30s, but I'm experiencing it right now.
Oh, that's better. It's right now. Can you tell me, because I'm just so curious, and I bet you a lot of people listening right now are very curious about, how did you bring yourself to a place of being innovative right now in a pandemic? How are you doing that?
Well, I think I decided to let go. So I was telling them today in the meeting that in the first 2 weeks, because we are in the training and events business, so in overnight, all our trainings and team buildings were canceled, literally in overnight. As soon as the Prime Minister announced that there are no big gatherings allowed, all the things that we had planned for a month and a half was canceled. And it was a big shock. I had huge anger inside me and huge frustration, because we were about to launch an office in Saudi Arabia as well. And we were going forward and we were growing and everything was really going good. And all of a sudden everything was canceled. So I was in deep anger when this happened, and I stayed in that anger for 2 weeks. And until I discovered that, well, there is nothing for me to do except to have faith and trust that even though I don't understand what's next and what's going to happen, that I have to trust that what's going to happen is the best. And the time I decided to let go of my anger and of my fears, though nothing has changed in terms of knowing what's next, but I started to release those anger feelings inside me, and only then I started replacing them with new ideas and new thoughts, and more things came into my mind which helped me to renovate 360 experiential solutions, launch a new website for it, launch new products, make different partnerships that can help us deliver different solutions online for our partners, and as well open 360 cloud solutions, which is going to offer systems to help companies to work remotely as well. And as I look back now, I'm thankful for that time. We still didn't grow or use all that products, but I know that we will, and I know that it is definitely for the best for us as a team, and for the company and for the group in the future.
That's so good. And honestly, again, like, you named your anger. You know, you were in that for 2 weeks, you said, and then when you were able to come out of that. And I hope that everyone listening hears that and realizes that we often think, I must need better business tools. And that is true. You know, we always are learning. We should never stop learning about how to do our businesses better. But when we ignore here first, there really is no cheating that. And I'm so proud of hearing your story, Bassam, that you did not ignore that. And now look at what you're doing. You're actually increasing in a season where a lot of people are being cut. That's incredible. I hope that brings a lot of hope and faith to people listening, because it really is possible. I was really encouraged when this pandemic hit. I wanted to know of businesses that thrived when there was crisis. And so in North America, we had something called the Great Depression in the 30s. I was not there. Abe, I don't think was there either. And I was so encouraged. I Googled this. And so maybe, Google, you can learn everything you need to know on the internet. And I Googled businesses that were thriving through the Great Depression. And, a couple of them were breweries. So breweries, beer companies, a lot of them were dying, but the ones that survived were the ones that were adaptable and were able to pivot and think out of the box. And these breweries that survived and thrived through the Great Depression were breweries that actually added milk and meat to their sales. They started thinking more about agriculture. Maybe we're not just a beer company. Maybe we're an agriculture company. Who thinks like that? I mean, this is what they did, and they thrived through it. One of our soap kind of companies here in Canada, Procter and Gamble, they started doing radio ads, which to us we think, well, that's no big deal. But back then, they started telling stories, and they targeted women in the home, because at that time that was who women were home, and they were doing the dishes, and so they started targeting these radio ads and telling stories. You think, what does storytelling have to do with my dish soap? Well, they just thought outside the box, and the women all over North America fell in love with these characters and basically started buying all their products. Sometimes the ideas that will come seem the most ridiculous. Have you ever had that, Abe? Have you ever had a time when you've had an idea, or a time when you've business through crisis and something surprised you?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, there's no doubt that there's two things that I've mastered in my career. Number one is failure. So I've learned a lot about that. But to be really honest, I think the second thing is thriving in the middle of crisis. And every time there's been a crisis, either personally or economically. Now, obviously, big pandemic that we're all dealing with. I've been able to rise to the surface. And I think part of the reason is, and I like what you were saying earlier, Connie, about the stress response. People have to understand that when we talk about mental health for business, this isn't just about, oh, we want people to feel good and, oh, let's all just pat each other on the back and make sure that we whisper sweet nothings into each other's ear. Your actual business outcomes depend on your mental health. And so when crisis emerges, if you are caught up in the stress response and, oh my God, am I going to get COVID? Oh my God, is my business going to survive? Oh my God, how am I going to make it through this? Well, I can promise you the best parts of your brain, the creativity, the innovation, the capacity to strategically problem solve will be minimized because you're right into survival mode. And so, I think, I could tell you lots of examples, but maybe the best one is when, years ago, I was a pastor, and that was my job for many years, and went through a really difficult time in my life where I lost my marriage. And as a result of that, lost my job. And as a result of that, lost all kinds of money and financial stability, and lost a lot of friends. And yet I still had an ex-wife that I needed to support financially, and 2 children. And so I thought to myself, well, what can I do? And if you looked at my resume from any sort of normal perspective, you would have thought that I can't do anything. I had an education in theology at the time, which doesn't have a lot of value on the street, so to speak. But you know what? I started looking at it through the lens of, well, wait a second, over my career, I've led grown nonprofits or charities, which is technically what a church is, from zero to something, from zero to millions of dollars. I've had dozens of employees. I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteers. And so I started to tell that story on my resume because I wanted people who were looking to hire someone to know that I hadn't just been some boring pastor priest type guy who was hiding behind a pulpit or a lectern, but that I had been an entrepreneur. And, and I actually was using with them the term social entrepreneur before, now it's become this big thing. But I said, I was an entrepreneur in social services, and now I'd like to bring that skill set to you. And I actually remember saying to people, if I could motivate hundreds of volunteers without paying them, just think of how great of a manager I'll be if I can actually pay them. And somebody was dumb enough to hire me, and I'm happy to report that it paid off for them. Because they made a lot of money, and and my career has just taken off since then. But if I had stayed in a stress response, curl up in a little ball somewhere, feel sorry for myself, I can guarantee you I wouldn't be where I am today. And that's why I love what Bassam was saying earlier about how, when I think about Egypt, I don't know a lot about Egypt, but I do follow the news. And you folks in Egypt, Bassam, and in the Middle East, you've had much more regular occurrences of turmoil and trauma to deal with than we have here. And especially in Egypt, when you look at the massive government change starting in right around, was it 2010, something like that?
11.
And, 11, yeah. And then, a couple revolutions since then. And, revolution in Egypt is different than here. For us, revolution is, I'm not paying my taxes, and then we wait for the government to take us to court. But over there, it's quite a bit different. People die, right? And so it's a tough place to do business. But I love what you're saying about thriving in the middle of. So that was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great, Abe. I hope that people, when they hear that, someone, I identify with the education, we can think of what we lack. We can spend all of our mental energy thinking about what we lack, or we can remember, I am creative. You are creative. If you're a human being, you have been created as a creative person. You already have that as a part of you. And if you don't remember it, it's just time today to remember that you are creative, because that is to be human. To be human is to innovate and to constantly be pushing through what is impossible. That is who we are. That's what we've always done. You look back through history and you could see it as a boring history lesson, or you could see the time and time again where humans just pushed through what was seemingly impossible. And we are in one of those moments right now in history where people are going to read about the times that people like you and I, just everyday ordinary people, rising above what was tragic and coming out of it on the other side. I just released a book that's being released in the middle of a pandemic. It's not the best time, to release a book. It really isn't. And I was going to have a book launch, and it was going to be an event. And like Bassam, I do events. And so when the pandemic happened, well, there goes all of our events. And for me, events are always just a small stream of income. And I thought, well, what am I going to do now? I can't release my book. I can't have an event. So what am I going to do? Well, I thought, what if I put it online? What if I upgrade my Zoom to have 500 people? What if I could get 500 people at my book launch? And then I started thinking about all the guests that I could invite, people to speak to the issue. I ended up having psychologists that would cost thousands of dollars at my book launch, speaking at it for free. And I had 500 people sign up for my book launch, because we have opportunities right now that have been available to us. To be honest, we could have been Zooming with 500 people a year ago, but we didn't think of it because we were caught in comfort. We were caught in the way things have always been. And now it's been completely disrupted. And we've had to think, well, I don't have an event space anymore. What do I have? Well, I have my computer and I have a Zoom account. And now that opportunity has exploded. Think about us right now. Think about how the three of us are sitting in the same room with you listening in any part of the room, in any part of the world. And I'm sitting on my couch in my living room. Are you kidding me right now? This is the kind of opportunities that are available to us. Bassam is in Canada right now, and we are in Egypt. This is beautiful, and it's because of people who think creatively. And so what opportunities right now are waiting for you to see them? They've always been there. They're not just going to appear out of nowhere. They are right there, right now, but what has been limiting you to see them? What kind of barriers? What kind of mindsets and mental prisons have disrupted you to allow you to not see what's in front? And I want to leave you with that question, because we're all here to say today that there are those opportunities, and we really are on your team. We want you to find them. We want you to succeed. We don't want any business left behind. And so that is my presentation. Thank you so much, Bassam.
Thank you, Connie. It's amazing that what you're saying today is pretty much similar to what we have been discussing in the office in the morning. And as we are speaking now, I would love that any of the audience that is watching right now, if you have any question or comment, you can write it down, and we are going to answer your questions. But until we get some questions, if any, I want to say that I think the key is to let go, is to admit your fears, and don't be afraid of admitting it, because we've all been there. We've and many of us is actually still there. So it's okay. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay not to understand. It's okay not to be in control. I'm a person who is control freak, and I personally love planning. I was telling them that I always loved planning. Even in my school years, when I didn't study all year, I loved to plan to study, though I didn't make my plan happen, but I loved planning. So I personally, I'm a person that loves planning. So now that I cannot plan, or back actually in 2 weeks time, when I couldn't plan, when I didn't know what to put in my agenda to be done, it was terrific for me. So I think that admitting your fears and knowing that you cannot actually control what's going to happen is the first step. And then the second step is that you need to think of what can you control. As you've had your last slide, what are the opportunities that are waiting for you? Like Zoom was there forever. I mean, but we've never thought of it, but now it might be one of the good opportunities that you can use. So don't get stuck in what you cannot control, but try to take advantage of what you can control. And I think this is the one key thing that will differ one person from another and one organization from another. If you are an owner for a business, we would love to help you. So you can drop us a message. We would love to take you further. We can discuss things with you and try to help you out. If you are an individual and you're stuck in your career and you don't know what's next, we are also there to help you. We have some time there, so we can get use of it and make people get better and make people keep on moving forward. And I'm sure that we all going to pass this to even better than where we left it a month and a half ago. So I don't think that we've got questions. We've only got people watching, so I hope they like what they're seeing. And I personally learned, so thank you, Connie, and thank you, Abe. It's always a pleasure to have you with us, and we're looking forward to have you again with us and to discuss more topics that will be beneficial to the community. And guys, stay tuned. We are going to have an annual virtual conference coming up soon, and we're going to announce on it. And we're going to have speakers from all over the globe speaking to us. So stay tuned, and looking forward to get live again with you soon. Thanks, Abe, and thanks, Connie.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated, and great job today, Connie.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really do love and appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Enjoy your day, and we'll get in touch soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.